So I feel like books rescue people. They save lives. And I love talking to people to find out more about them and how I can connect them to the right book for what they need in that moment.
Hello readers, I'm Victoria Wood and you're listening to Biblio Happy Hour, the show that shares new book releases, we chat to the authors who write them, and the people who sell them. Every week, we'll share some of the new books that will be hitting bookshelves that week. We'll invite an author or two or more on the show to talk about their debut or newest release, and we'll introduce you to an independent bookseller and their bookstore so you can stop by, get tailored book recommendations, and pick up some new books when you're in town. So make space on your bookshelves, follow us on social media, and make sure you're subscribed to Biblio Happy Hour wherever you listen to your favorite shows. Readers, Biblio Lifestyle is a newsletter, community, and space for people who can't live a life without books in it. Every Friday, you'll get a special treat in your inbox filled with inspirational content, book recommendations, self-care tips, original interviews, and things we think you'll enjoy. The best part? You'll only receive one email per week, and it will be an amazing 5-minute read or less. So if you're not on the list, sign up now for our free weekly delivery at bibliolifestyle.com. I've included a link in the show notes so you can sign up there. This week, I'll be chatting with bookseller Shane Gottwals from Gottwals Books, located in Warner Robins, Georgia. We'll be talking about his bookstore, the town of Warner Robins, Georgia, the Walls of Books franchise, what readers can expect when visiting his bookstore, and so much more. Shane, thank you so much for coming on the show, and welcome to Biblio Happy Hour.
Hey, I appreciate it. It's a real honor for me.
So happy to have you here. So really quick before we get started with the show, are you a coffee or a tea person?
I lived in Oxford, England for a while, and I was trained to like coffee by my guests those couple of months I lived in England. So I'm definitely a coffee drinker. It's an everyday, can't get out the door without it kind of thing, and maybe another cup throughout the day, but typically just one in the morning.
Alrighty, okay, sounds good. So just to let our listeners know, you are also the founder of the Walls of Books franchise. But before we get into details where that is concerned, we're going to talk more about your bookstore, your flagship Gottwals Books. So tell us more about your bookstore, where you're located, and share a bit about your town of Warner Robins.
Yeah, we started back in 2007 in Warner Robins, very clueless as to what we were doing, but we had a little 1,500 square foot shop, and we called it Gottwals Books, just our last name, and went forward from there. It took a couple of years, but once we got the hang of it, we ended up opening a second location in Byron, Georgia, right up the road. And then about 6 months after that, we opened a third location up in Macon, Georgia. It's another few minutes up the road. And then we went south a little bit a couple of years after that one and opened up in Perry. But yeah, we're a chain of used and new. Our specialty is secondhand books, but we do a lot of new books as well. But yeah, it's a really nice local atmosphere. It's not a gigantic community, but we have a couple of big pockets of populations, probably about 150,000 to 200,000 people on each side of the north end and south end of where we're located. But yeah, no, it's our stores are just fairly small, but very welcoming and just a very hands-on approach, and our community really loves it. Warner Robins is a military town, very diverse, just lots of different cultures coming in and out, just with different deployments through our Air Force Base, Robins Air Force Base. And yeah, our other communities are diverse in their own ways, but Warner Robins, where it all started, is definitely the most unique, I think, of all the locations.
Was this your initial intention? Did you always know that you're going to end up in the bookstore business, or did an opportunity present itself and you decided, okay, yep, I'm going to jump on board and get involved? How did this whole thing get started back in 2007?
When I graduated high school in 2002, I went into Sears, selling retail in the retail stores, of course, selling in Brand Central. It's electronics, appliances, but my focus was on televisions and car audio. So I had a pretty good retail background from that point on until we ended up opening up the stores. So it wasn't really about selling books. I mean, my mother was a school teacher. I was raised just to appreciate books and love learning and literacy. But it really wasn't until my wife and I were sitting with her parents at the dinner table one time. And her parents were missionaries in Chile, South America, and her dad mentioned that he had a little bookshop on the mission field while they were there. And that's all it really took. It got the idea in our heads. I thought, well, retail. I've got an English degree. My wife has a business degree. So what do you do with an English and a business degree? We'll put them together and call it a bookshop. And not a wise way of going into, well, really at the time in 2007 was not a good time for anybody to start any retail business, much less, a bookshop.
Right.
But yeah, as I said, I mean, we went in somewhat foolhardy, but I'm glad we did. And it just took a while, but we eventually figured it out. But that was the impetus behind it.
Oh, wow. Okay. But I'd also want our listeners to know more about the Walls of Books franchise. How did all of that get started? So you started a bookstore, but then now you guys are in the franchise business. How did that come about?
Yeah, well, we grew so rapidly for a little while there with our own stores, and then all of a sudden we had a gentleman come through one day and basically said, I'd like to write you a check to teach me how to do what you do, and why don't you do it? And so we worked into that relationship, and we tried that out, and it really went well. But what happened was there was really no oversight long term. It was more of a consultation. And lo and behold, just a little while after that, a gentleman came across what we were doing and was interested in actually purchasing the franchise rights. So we would keep our 4 stores. He would cut us a check, and then he would go and basically run this thing nationwide. And we never came to an agreement with him, and I'm glad that we didn't. But eventually, that's what got the idea in our heads. So we knew we could translate the information to someone. We then got the idea about franchising from this other gentleman, and then, long story short, we decided just to do it on our own and then expand nationwide that way. And we've been quite successful with it, and we have a number of owners who have multiple locations and others that are looking to open more stores and grow. And so we feel it's a tough business, but we do feel pretty good about what we're doing.
But just to be clear for our listeners, if an individual is interested in opening a bookstore, they can come to you and they can own the bookstore independently. It's just that you provide, what is it that you really do provide?
Yeah, and when we say franchise, it's kind of, it can be misleading based on what people take that word to mean. So This is not like McDonald's, where you walk in and everybody's wearing the exact same uniform and saying the exact same things, and you got the exact same menu. And this is still a bookshop. So what we provide, the way we put it is, we want people to come into the Walls of Books franchise with their passion for books and be able to focus on books and book selling and making recommendations and promoting literacy in their community and all those good things, all the warm fuzzies that come with operating a bookstore, which is what we're in it for. But let us think about the business part, those aspects that are that take more experience to do properly. And then we provide all the training. So someone goes to wallsofbooks.net, they check everything out, they call us up. We then come to an arrangement with a franchise agreement that we have. We then train them. We'll help them find a store. We'll help them sign a lease. We'll make sure all the pieces are in place, and then we'll even come and set the bookshop up from start to finish and hand them over, usually within a course of a week, a fully functioning retail bookstore. And they run from there, but then we're holding their hand every step of the way. So we're constantly there to offer support, training, a group, collective purchasing. I mean, there's just all kinds of features that we provide that we didn't have, and that's much of the motivation behind it. We didn't have any of that, and if we could have started out with all the resources, we could be, even further along than we are now. And that's really the primary motivation behind doing this.
What would you say over the years has been your biggest challenge in being an independent bookstore owner, but also what is the thing you love the most?
The biggest challenge was purely the time commitment involved, just the number, not only the number of hours, but just also the time spent in vehicles traveling around, getting inventory or going to shows. the thought that goes behind it is just it's pretty tedious, but that translates straight into the best part about it. I mean, you're dealing with literature and you're dealing with ideas, and so all these products that we're pushing, there's so much more than a product, right?
Right.
It's something that we can really believe in. We can really stand behind. We know it's benefiting people with every transaction. I mean, it's making people smarter by getting their nose in a book instead of their hand on a remote control. There's a lot of joy in the minutia, but there is a lot of minutia. But it's that being confident about what we're doing, being a cultural center, being a learning center. But on top of that, you get to talk with fantastic people, our customers who appreciate it the same way we do. So it's a great product, but it's also a great experience when that product changes hands.
Right. No, that's definitely something to love. And wrapping up, what would you like everyone listening to know about you and your bookstore? And in this case, we're going to add on franchise as well. What do you want everyone listening to know about Gottwals Books as well as the Walls of Books franchise? What do you want everyone listening to know?
I'd love them to know that there is a lot of love that goes in. It sounds kind of cheesy to say that, but there's a lot of love that goes into what they walk into when they open the door and start poking around. Just the attention to detail that we give to what we are selling and the hours spent debating each new product line that we'll introduce, and just the families that it supports. I mean, the people that we have working in these stores are just really salt of the earth, just wonderful folks, but many of them with children, and the money that they spend then goes to, buy new shoes for the kid or put a dinner on the table. It's very relational. What we're doing, we've grown. We have these four main stores, the ones that we own, and then we have these other roughly 10 franchises nationwide all across the country, and we're opening more as we speak. Actually, working on 2 or 3 new ones at the moment. But these are all very homegrown businesses using smart business principles. But it's a family ordeal, and we just want people to really sense that when they come in and know that they're supporting just some really good folks, and some really good folks are trying to support them by the books that we put on the shelves.
Absolutely. Shane, thank you so much for taking the time out, coming on the show and talking about your bookstore and just everything books and the bookish community. We really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Readers, you can connect with Gottwals Books in Warner Robins, Georgia at their website, gottwalsbooks.com. You can also find them on Facebook at Gottwals Books. And for more information on the Walls of Books franchise, visit wallsofbooks.net. If you'd like to tune in to the rest of my conversation with bookseller Shane Gottwals, the full podcast episode will be available on our Patreon page. That's patreon.com/bibliofinder. To find an independent bookstore near you or when you're traveling, visit bibliofinder.com. Bibliofinder is a new online directory for independent bookstores, and they help users to find bookstores worldwide based on your current or planned location. If you're on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, please tag Bibliofinder in your indie bookstore photos. Before I get started with this week's new releases, I'd like to highlight 2 literary events happening this week as well. On March 19th, the Pulitzer Prize-winning novelist Philip Roth was born on this day in 1933. Popular novels written by Roth are American Pastoral, Portnoy's Complaint, The Human Satin, Goodbye Columbus, and Nemesis. March 21st is World Poetry Day. You can learn more about World Poetry Day at un.org. Now, I will be mentioning some of the books that will be available on bookshelves during the week of Monday, March 16th. And I'm thrilled to have authors Maxine Mei-Fung Chung and Stephanie Wrobel on the show to talk about their new books. New this week from Custom House, After Me Comes the Flood by Sarah Perry. After Me Comes the Flood is the haunting debut novel by Sarah Perry, who is also the author of The Essex Serpent and Melmoth. New from Harper Books, 88 Names by Matt Roth. 88 Names is described as part cyber thriller, part twisted romantic comedy that transports you to a world where identity is fluid and nothing can be taken at face value. New from Harlequin, The Sea Glass Cottage by Rayanne Thane. The Sea Glass Cottage is an uplifting story of loss, healing, family, and triumph over life's adversities as three women try to heal the scars of the past and make peace with each other. New this week from Delphinum Books, Love, Death and Rare Books by Robert Hellinger. New from William Morrow Books, The Shape of Family by Shilpai Somaya Goda. The Shape of Family is a novel about a family that's growing apart and coming back together in the wake of tragedy. It explores the ways we all seek belonging in our families, our communities, and ultimately within ourselves. Also new from William Morrow, How to Be Fine, What We Learned from Living by the Rules of 50 Self-Help Books by Jolenta Greenberg and Kristen Meinzer. New this week from William Morrow Books is a debut psychological thriller entitled The Eighth Girl. And we have the author Maxine Mei-Fung Chung here with us to share all the details. Maxine, welcome to Biblio Happy Hour.
Thank you, Victoria. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, of course. Really excited to have you here. So, your debut novel, The Eighth Girl, will be available in bookshelves in the US this week. How are you feeling? How excited are you?
I'm thrilled. I'm so excited. I always had a hope that when I started thinking about writing The Eighth Girl, that it would be something that would start conversation. So I'm really kind of jazzed to get that conversation started and looking forward to all ahead.
Oh,
a little nervous, of course, with it being my first novel, but primarily excited.
Right, absolutely. So tell them about The Eighth Girl and what can readers expect?
So it's a kind of psychological thriller suspense novel which follows the story of a young girl, Alexa Wu, who is living with DID, dissociative identity disorder, previously known as multiple personality disorder. And basically, it's a look at identity and innocence and the impossible weights that young women are forced to carry. And it causes us to question, does the truth lead to self-discovery or self-destruction? And the book oscillates between two voices, between Alexa Wu and her psychiatrist, Daniel Rosenstein. And basically what unfolds are the complexities of living with this disorder. And she finds herself involved in some criminal activities, and she has to kind of find her way through this with truth. There are only 3 people that know about her disorder, which is her stepmother, Anna, her psychiatrist, Daniel, and her best friend, Ella. And she tries to kind of navigate the world with some complexities. So there's some twists and turns in there, and I'm hoping, some lingering shocks. And it's basically just about a young woman trying to find her way in the world, having survived earlier childhood trauma.
Right. Okay. So what inspired you to write The Eighth Girl? Tell us about some of the wheels that were turning in your mind.
I guess it came about as a result of my actually being a psychotherapist for the last 15 years. And aside from my practice, I was becoming increasingly interested in people who had survived traumatic life events and who were showing symptoms of DID. And what I was hearing a lot was that maybe in the past, people who were living with DID were not always portrayed in a way that it was terribly kind or generous towards their symptoms. So, sometimes they've been portrayed as psychotic or serial killers, or the kind of, the lunatic trope that has sometimes been used previously. And I have to say that I was experiencing something very, very different when I was meeting and talking to people living with DID. And that was that they were incredibly creative and incredibly resilient. And I felt that this was something that I wanted to kind of put across with Alexa, and to have the opportunity to speak for people living with ID as opposed to about them. And I just felt it would be a really interesting conversation starter.
Right, absolutely. But do you also think society's thought process when it comes to mental health has also changed? So with that, do you think society's more open to, hearing these stories, whether, in fiction or non-fiction? Do you think we're a lot more receptive today in comparison to, say, when you started 15, maybe even in school 20 years ago?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're a lot more open, although I still think there's an immense amount of work to be done. And I think, there's a long way to go before we do still break down stigmatization. And I think that writing fiction is a powerful way of kind of exploring these issues. Sometimes we don't want to always go to a heavy, dense text around mental health issues. Sometimes we want to learn through the telling of a story. So that was one of the intentions behind The Eighth Girl, that we take kind of serious ideas, but we kind of make them accessible.
Right. Absolutely. So is there a particular scene in the novel that you enjoyed writing, or a scene that, you related to personally?
That's a really good question. I guess that comes down to maybe which of the characters I really liked writing for and about. So I guess it would be some of the scenes that I don't think I'm oversharing when I say that there's a character, one of her personalities, who's a lot older than Alexa herself, who is called Runner. And I really enjoyed writing her because she's quite fierce and she's got a great moral compass. So I really enjoyed her. She's a kind of protector. And so there was a lot of agency and a lot of empowerment in writing those parts.
Right. Okay. So if you didn't write, what would you do for work, or in this case, a creative pursuit?
Oh, wow. I'd love to be a florist. Okay. Because I love flowers and nature and walking and collecting flowers. So I'd probably do something really creative. And my career before I was actually a psychoanalyst I was a creative director. So I'd probably return to that.
Okay.
Do something different.
Yes. Okay. So getting into your reading life, what was the last book that you finished reading that you'd now recommend?
Can I have two?
Yes.
I think it would have to be Wendy Walker's The Night Before and Alex Michaelides' The Silent Patient. Yeah, I love both of those books because the characters were so well-rounded and fleshed out, but there were so many twists and they were smart and such rich characters that kind of led the stories. So I think those were the two that I really enjoyed recently.
Okay. So when you're not reading or writing, what are you doing?
Sleeping. I tend to do quite a lot of walking and yoga, but it has to be said, because I work quite intensely in the week, I like some escape, so I do lots of walks and runs and yoga and health conscious things. So that's kind of what I'm doing at the weekends when I have free time.
Right. Okay. So part of the podcast is all about indie bookstores and indie booksellers. Share with our listeners some of your favorite indie bookstores.
So I work in central London in Bloomsbury, and so that's wonderful because we have a few indie bookstores that I visit quite regularly in my lunch hour or after work. And the first one is the London Review Bookshop, which is just a 5-minute walk from where I practice, which is a really wonderful bookstore. And the other one is Gaze the Word, which is also based probably 10 or 15-minute walk from where I'm working, which have a lot of kind of diverse writers and a lot of authors events, which really brings together the community to talk about book clubs and so forth, which is amazing. And then thirdly, I would say the Persephone bookshop, it's a kind of out of print female authors bookshop. And it's just for women's voices. So I regularly go there too. So those are probably my top three that come to mind.
Right. Okay. So getting back to The Eighth Girl, how do you want readers to feel after reading this book? What are some of the reactions you're hoping for?
I think I'd like people to pause and think about the impact of trauma in our kind of psychological mental health. I'd also like there to be maybe some lingering shock in terms of some of the revelations in the book. But ultimately, I'd like there to be a questioning of what it means to be human. What it means to be flawed, and to, if we can, find some peace with that.
Right. Okay, absolutely. Maxine, thank you so much for coming on the show. Listeners, The Eighth Girl will be available in bookstores on Tuesday, March 17th.
Thank you so much for having me, Victoria. It's a pleasure talking with you.
Readers, you can connect with author Maxine Mei-Fung Chung at her website, maxinemeifungchung.com. You can also find her on Instagram at author_Maxine Mei-Fung Chung and on Twitter at Meifung100. You can also tune in to the rest of my chat with Maxine in our off-the-cuff discussion over on our Patreon page. She shares more about her writing process, her favorite childhood books, and writing projects she's currently working on. So head on over to patreon.com/bibliofinder and tune in to the rest of our conversation. New this week from Ballantine Books, Last Couple Standing by Matthew Norman. In The Last Couple Standing, a couple is determined not to end up like their divorced friends by trying an open marriage. New in paperback from Hogarth Books, Normal People by Sally Rooney. New from Knopf Books, No One Will Tell You This But Me by Bess Kalb. Also new from Knopf, Broadway for Paul, a poetry collection by Vincent Katz. New from Nan A. Talese, The New Life of Hugo Gardner by Louise Begley. The New Life of Hugo Gardner is a sharp new comedy of manners. Divorced after decades of a comfortable marriage, retired journalist Hugo Gardner sets out to explore the paths not traveled. New from Doubleday Books, The Red Lotus by Chris Bohalian. The Red Lotus is a twisty story of love and deceit, where an American man vanishes on a rural road in Vietnam, and his girlfriend, an emergency room doctor trained to ask questions, follows a path that leads her home to the very hospital where they met. New in paperback from Vintage Books, The Other Americans by Leila Lalami. New this week from Riverhead Books, How to Be an Artist by Jerry Saltz. New in paperback from Riverhead, Lot, a story collection by Brian Washington. New this week from Berkeley Books is a debut novel entitled Darling Rose Gold, and we have the author Stephanie Wrobel here with us to share all the details. Stephanie, welcome to Biblio Happy Hour.
Thank you so much for having me.
So your debut, Darling Rose Gold, will be available on bookshelves this week. How are you feeling? How excited are you?
Oh God, I'm thrilled. This is, every writer's dream, and it's been a long time coming. The book deal came about a year ago, so to finally have it be here is just so exciting.
Right, absolutely. So tell our listeners about Darling Rose Gold and what can readers expect?
Sure. So Darling Rose Gold is a story about a mother and daughter named Patty and Rose Gold Watts. And Rose Gold has been sick her entire life. She's had a feeding tube, she's used a wheelchair, and nobody can figure out what's wrong with her. And so it comes out that Patty, her mother, has actually been the one making her ill all along. And Patty goes to prison for these abuses. And so the book starts with Patty getting out of prison after 5 years away. And she has no one to turn to. The whole town is turned against her. So she goes to her now adult daughter, Rose Gold, and begs her to take her in. And much to the surprise of everyone in town, Rose Gold says yes. And so mother and daughter move in together. Patty insists all she wants is to reconcile with her daughter. But Rose Gold knows her mother, and she knows that she always settles a score. But the question is, how has Rose Gold changed over the last 5 years while Patty's been away? And hint, she is not the little weakling that her mother thinks that she is. So it's a story of revenge and obsession and reconciliation.
Okay. What inspired you to write Darling Rose Gold? Give us some details on what was going on in your mind at the time.
Sure. So I first found out about Munchausen by proxy, which is what Patty has, from my best friend who is an elementary school psychologist. And she has experience with the syndrome through her work with her students and their parents. And she told me about it, and I just remember being both intrigued and horrified. And so I went down this rabbit hole of research, and I was shocked to discover that the perpetrators are often women or mothers. And, we think of this mother-child bond as sacred, but it's not in these cases. And I wanted to explore why that was.
Okay. Who's your favorite character in the novel?
Good question. I have to go with Patty. Even though Rose Gold is the titular character, she was really the first character that came to mind. I wanted to get inside of her head and figure out, does she know that she's lying? Does she honestly think she's doing what's best for her kids? So I think playing the more villainous character and trying to roam around inside of their head is always a more interesting challenge as a writer.
Right, absolutely. So is there a particular scene in the novel that you enjoyed writing the most, or is there a scene that resonated with you personally?
I think as far as enjoyed writing the most, the scenes that come toward the end, I guess, where you're, starting to figure out that, well, I don't want to give anything away, but not all is as it seems, but
right.
I'm trying to work around this now, but I think, the sort of big reveal scene where Rose Gold makes a discovery is probably one of my favorites, because I think, that stuff is just super fun as a writer to write when you've been laying all these puzzle pieces out and then everything starts to come together.
Right. Okay. And if you didn't write, what would you do for work or as a creative pursuit?
Well, I can give both my practical previous life answer and then a sort of more lofty, no basis in reality answer. And the practical answer is I used to work in advertising as a writer, so I was writing TV and radio spots and digital and all of that. So I think, it's not as creative as what I'm doing now, of course, but it's still some form of writing. But I think if I could do any creative pursuit, I always thought being a dancer would be amazing. I was enrolled in ballet for one short year in kindergarten and then gave it up. But, if I had stuck with it in a previous life, that would have been pretty cool, I think.
Okay. Getting into your reading life, what was the last book that you finished reading that you'd now recommend?
So I just finished reading, I'm a little bit behind everyone, but I just finished reading The Power by Naomi Alderman, and it was incredible. I didn't really know what to expect, but I really liked the premise, which is, what if women were just as strong or stronger than men? How would that change society? How would that change personal relationships? And it was just this huge global look at how the world would be affected, and I was just riveted by it. I highly recommend it.
Oh, awesome. And what would you say is your favorite childhood book?
I was really into series as a kid, so I, would find a series that I like and read all of the books in it, like Nancy Drew and the Babysitter's Club and the Thoroughbred series, because I went through a real horse phase. So yeah, I would just basically find a book with a big series and then just go devour book after book after book.
Okay. So when you're not reading or writing, what are you doing?
I really like to travel a lot. So as much as I can, especially now that I live in London, it's a lot easier to get around Europe. 2-hour flights can take you to most countries on the continent. So I like to travel a lot. I like to eat a lot, try new restaurants and different foods. And I have a dog named Moose, and taking him to parks and stuff is a lot of fun as well.
Right. Okay, so part of the podcast is all about indie bookstores and indie booksellers. So share with our listeners some of your favorite indie bookstores.
Sure. So in Chicago, which is where I'm from originally, I really love Anderson's bookstore, which in LaGrange, and they also have some other branches, and the Lake Forest bookstore as well is so adorable, and I love the bookseller there. And then here in London, I actually live in a neighborhood called Hackney, and there's a bookstore around the corner called Pages of Hackney that's really quaint and cozy, and I love the staff there as well.
Oh, awesome. So getting back to Darling Rose Gold now, how do you want readers to feel after reading this book? What are some of the reactions you're hoping for, or what are some of the questions you're hoping readers might have?
That's a good question. I don't know if I'm hoping for any specific reaction or takeaways for readers. I think my job as a writer is to just present a story and its characters and entertain people and hopefully make them think. But I do think it's interesting to sort of examine mental illness and, the effects that it has both on the perpetrator and the victim. I think what I tried to do with this book is look at, if the definition of victim is maybe not so simple, because, people with Munchausen by proxy typically have histories of childhood abuse and neglect themselves. And so that obviously informs who they are. And so, yeah, I think it's just kind of opening up the conversation. And I think also, even, if you take the Munchausen by proxy out of it, just the relationships that mothers and daughters have. So hopefully most of them aren't as dysfunctional as this one, but they can certainly be complicated. And I think it's a really important relationship that bears examination.
Right, absolutely. Stephanie, thank you so much for coming on the show. Listeners, Darling Rose Gold will be available in bookstores on Tuesday, March 17th.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Readers, you can connect with author Stephanie Wrobel at her website, stephaniewrobel.com. You can also find her on Instagram at Stephanie Wrobel, on Twitter at Steph Wrobel, and on Facebook, Stephanie Wrobel Books. You can also tune in to the rest of my chat with Stephanie in our off-the-cuff discussion over on our Patreon page. She shares more about her writing process and other projects she's currently working on. So head on over to patreon.com/bibliofinder and tune in to the rest of our conversation. New this week from Scribner Books, A Conspiracy of Bones by Kathy Reichs. New from Grand Central Publishing, The Boy from the Woods by Harlan Coben. In The Boy from the Woods, a man with a mysterious past must find a missing teenage girl. New from Jimmy Patterson Books, The Fall of Crazy House by James Patterson and Gabrielle Charbonnet. This is book 2 in the Crazy House series. New from Basic Books, Hitler's First 100 Days by Peter Freich. In Hitler's First 100 Days, Freich reveals how Germany's fractured republic gave way to the Third Reich, from the formation of the Nazi Party to the rise of Hitler himself. Readers, if you need a more tailored selection of books to keep on your radar, or you want to hear more from your favorite authors that we've had on the show, become a patron at patreon.com/bibliofinder. For $1 per month, you'll get our monthly top shelf recommendations of new releases that we're super excited about. You'll also hear more from your favorite authors in our off-the-cuff discussions. You'll get our full Meet the Bookseller podcast episodes, get bookish-themed Instagram templates, plus lots more. That's patreon.com/bibliofinder. I've included a link in the show notes so you can sign up there. New from Minotaur Books, The Woman in the Mirror by Rebecca James. The Woman in the Mirror is a modern Gothic novel of a family consumed by the shadows and secrets of its past. New from Tor Books, The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. New from St. Martin's Press, Pride of Eden by Taylor Brown. The Pride of Eden is set on the eroding edge of civilization, rooted in dramatic events linked not only with each character's past, but to the prehistory of America, where great creatures roam the continent and continue to inhabit our collective imagination. New from Fewell and Friends, Blood, a memoir by the Jonas Brothers, by Joe Jonas, Kevin Jonas, Nick Jonas, and Neil Strauss. Readers, I hope you enjoyed today's show. A list of all the books mentioned in the show will be available over at bibliohappyhour.com. To shop all the books I've mentioned in the show and to find a bookstore near you or when you're traveling, visit bibliofinder.com. If you're on Twitter or Facebook, please let us know at Biblio Happy Hour and tag us in your post over on Instagram, also at Biblio Happy Hour. If you enjoy listening to our podcast, please share Biblio Happy Hour with your favorite bookish friends, share us on social media, and please leave us a rating and review. Don't forget, Biblio Lifestyle newsletter subscribers are the first to know all the podcast happenings, get free goodies in the mail, and they can enter for a chance to win some free books. So if you're not on the list, sign up now for our free weekly delivery at bibliolifestyle.com. I've included a link in the show notes so you can sign up there. Alrighty readers, that's it for today's show. Thank you so much for listening and happy reading.